They describe it as like a bluish flame, kind of a bluish in color. And he said, it engulfs the tomb, but I don't get burned. The fire is there, it's pervasive, and yet it is never destructive. It does not become an automatic fire that we understand, the created fire. It's the uncreated light of Christ.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide. And we see God. We see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention, inviting us into a closer relationship. Here we share stories of encounter with angels, divine interventions, prophetic dreams, visions, near-death experiences, miraculous healings, big and little God incidents. I'm your host, Trapper Jack. Thanks for joining us here today on Touched by Heaven. I call these conversations. These are the ongoing conversations between God and His people. God has always communicated with His people, and we're communicating back. There are conversations going on. That's what these encounters are. And today, it's the conversation of all conversations. Because without a resurrection, if Jesus doesn't rise, there's no podcast, there's no church, there's no Christianity, right? You have to have a resurrection. So God, did you leave us an incredible sign that there was a resurrection? Yes. Do most Christians acknowledge it? No. Why? Make up your own mind on this one. But for over 1,600 years, every year, on the same day, at the same place, same time, this miraculous event happens. This ongoing conversation where God is saying, my son rose, hey, yo. And yet, most Christians are oblivious. It's usually ignorance. It's not because we don't want to know, we just don't know. So, and it's one of my favorite stories. When I'm giving a talk, I'll often talk about the miracle of the holy fire or the miracle of the holy light. And I usually stop and go, anybody heard this story? And there's this chorus of no. And everyone should know this. Everybody should know this story. This isn't just for one faith, and yet just a small sliver of Christianity knows about this miraculous event that happens every year at the tomb of Christ. Every year, for more than 1,600 years, fire has come out of rock. Fire has come out of the stone where Jesus was laid in the tomb, right there on that stone. Fire created by God comes out, and what happens afterwards is even crazier. So you want to hear the story? Do you know the story? It's just the best. When I was on the radio, I used to do this on secular radio. I'd talk about this. I'd call it the greatest story never told because so few Christians knew about it. Not that they didn't want to know, they just weren't told. So let's do it. A couple of years back, I did an interview with a Father Kostas, priest at a Greek Orthodox church, St. Paul's in North Royalton, Ohio. And so he'll tell the story and kind of help us understand why most of us don't know about this miraculous event. I'm at this beautiful church, St. Paul's Greek Orthodox Church in North Royalton, Ohio. My son and I, Stephen, are here to talk to Father Kostas, who's been a priest for 25 years this year. Immediately, I can smell...
Smells like incense.
That's what I smell, yeah. And the church is absolutely gorgeous. Father's been here for 8 years. And
Is that Father?
I'm Father Costa.
Hey, how are we doing, Father?
I'm good. How are you?
God bless you. Thank you
Nice
so
to
much.
see
This is
you.
my son, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Very good. You pronounce it Kostas?
Costas.
Yes?
But it's a shorter version of Constantine.
Oh, okay.
So Constantine's a full name.
So explain what we have here, Father.
As you come into the main church, we're surrounded by all these beautiful icons, these images depicting the life of Christ. Icons are depictions of the Lord or the saints. In the dome, we have the icon of the Almighty. And in the very front of the church, where the holy altar is, behind the icon screen, we have the big icon of the Virgin Mary. In her embrace is Christ, leading us all to Him. And just various images depicting the life of Christ, from His birth to His 40-day churching, and all the way through His Palm Sunday entry, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and all the way through.
Now, what are those lights over there?
We have an opportunity for people to light a candle, and it's lit in the church. If they light it on Sunday, it's like a 7-day votive, and it will stay there the whole week. So a candle is really an expression of somebody's prayer.
Now, are all the candles in here, do they all have that beautiful new history that you've brought to this church?
When we were able to get the light a few weeks ago, we blew out all the candles in the church and relit them with the holy fire, as it is called, the holy light that came from Jerusalem. Yes.
This is one of my favorite stories. And almost 10 years ago, I first started talking about this on the radio, on secular radio. And I called it the greatest story never told. Because unless you come to an Orthodox church, you don't hear this story. Let's go to that Easter Vigil time and go to Jerusalem. And is it the Archbishop that's headed over to the Holy Sepulchre?
It is the Patriarch of Jerusalem, which is the highest ranking bishop of our church there. This is a ceremony, as you said, going back to the first centuries. Eusebius was a historian, and he recounts something along these lines back in the 2nd century. And then all the way through, it became more formalized a little later on. But it's one of those consistent miracles that takes place every year for almost 2,000 years now.
This is the real deal, right? This is the real deal.
Well, again, we live in an age where, people like to refute everything but the question goes back to, do we believe in miracles? Do we believe in that reality that there's something far beyond us, far beyond what our mind can capture, what our mind can conceive? And in this beautiful ceremony, the Holy Sepulchre, by the way, is this big conglomerate of chapels. It's this big church, cathedral. And within it, there is a small chapel dedicated to the resurrection. And it is in this little chapel that the Patriarch enters. Now, again, the authority is there. The Israeli police and all that are very much present. And they inspect. They're the ones that will go in, check the chapel. There's nothing there.
It's just a stone tomb, right?
Exactly. When you go inside, on a day-to-day, there might be some candles burning, but that evening, everything is removed. But the point, though, is that when the Patriarch, there's a ceremony that brings him in front of the chapel, and he's divested, he takes all his vestments off, and he just wears this simple white robe. And I understand that he is inspected, there's nothing on him. He goes in, and as he goes in, he holds these bunches of candles, 33 bunched together, for each year denoting the Lord's age, for 33 candles. And so as he goes in, he kneels in prayer, and by now the whole environment is just packed with people. And there's some video that shows, the ceremony, and there were just people all over the place. And sometimes 5, sometimes 10, 15 minutes later, he goes in, he comes out rather, and he holds the lit candles in his hands. And at that point, pandemonium breaks. Everybody's just thrilled and happy, and they're happy to be able to see and to receive the light from his hand. And then the light spreads throughout the whole cathedral, and then it goes. Now, it's interesting that in areas where you could fly to from Jerusalem, like Greece and other European countries that are Orthodox, they have a flight waiting, and as soon as the light gets to the airport in Tel Aviv, it's flown to Greece, it's flown to the Balkan countries. This ceremony takes place Saturday at noon, and the actual service that we do is Saturday night going into Sunday morning. So they have that time to be able to fly the light into Greece, for example, to spread throughout the country, as many places as could accommodate it. And so they're able to use that actual light for their services of the resurrection, which is midnight, Saturday going into Sunday, Easter morning.
And for Catholics who have been to Easter Vigil Mass, where the church is completely dark, and then the one candle comes in, which lights the other candles, which lights the other candles, it seems to be replicating what goes on in Jerusalem.
And that is the ancient, again, the Catholic and the Orthodox were one church for 1,000 years. So there's a lot of common practices. And in our church here, as in all the other churches, on Saturday night, midnight, the whole church goes in darkness. We shut all the lights off. We blow all the candles off. The only candle that is lit, or the only vigil light that is lit, is the one on the altar table. And from there, I reach in and light the candle, and I come out to the people, chanting this beautiful hymn saying, "Come, receive the light from the unwaning light, and glorify Christ who is risen from the dead." And then one by one, every single person in the congregation here lights the candle they're holding in their hand. And the church again becomes aglow with the lit candles of the faithful. And then at that point, they are ready to hear the gospel proclaiming the resurrection.
The patriarchs who have talked about what happens inside the tomb, how do they describe where that fire comes from, how it begins, and what happens with it?
I had read an interview that was done with the present patriarch, and he just says it's different every time, in a sense that I kneel, I lift up the candles, and sometimes there's like this, either like a lightning that comes, that lights the candles, or something that is spread all over the tomb, and it lights. But it's like, they describe it as like a bluish flame, kind of a bluish in color. And he said it engulfs the tomb, but I don't get burned. He says, because I have long beards and all that, he says, my beard never caught on fire. The fire is there, it's pervasive, and yet it is never destructive.
And that's one of the properties of this fire for 10, 20 minutes, depending on when you receive it?
For some time, yes, right after you receive it. And you see people running it through their face, and they see it as a blessing to show that it does not burn. It does not become an automatic fire that we understand, the created fire. It's the uncreated light of Christ,
The other thing, there was one patriarch I read who said for him, the fire appeared as a mist above the slab that he was laid out on, and then that formed two columns of fire, and that's how he lit I think he had two bunches of 33 candles, one in each hand.
Right.
And for him, it started as a mist, turned it into columns, and then he lit his
And that's why, they're saying that it's not a one way, a consistent way. It can be different from time to time. And this is where, again, these patriarchs or people of faith kneel before the presence of God and say, we can never understand the fullness of what happened, and yet we accept it.
And the other part inside this, inside the church and everything, as I understand it, and you tell me, there are lamps like 20 feet off the ground, and I've talked to a couple of people, some clergy and some just pedestrians, if you will, the rest of us, lay people, who have talked about how it can appear like a laser light show in there, and that the fire will actually jump up to the lamps 20 feet off the ground. Have you heard that?
I have heard that, and actually there's balconies, because again, this is a huge complex, and there's little balconies from different chapels looking down into the main church, and people scattered all over trying to find a place to because it is packed. And there's witnesses saying that even those standing, many, many feet away from the entrance of this chapel with their candles reached out, these flames, as they sort of kind of go throughout the cathedral, sometimes their candles are lit, and there's no explanation for that.
It's got a life of its own.
Exactly.
And you talked about how once upon a time this was a unified church, and this is the part of the origin of Christianity. So how is it that Catholic churches don't talk about this? Protestant churches don't talk about this?
Yeah. Let me say that the church, from the very beginning, when Christ came into the world, and on the day of Pentecost, he sent the Holy Spirit upon the church, and they went out and they formed 5 sort of centers: Jerusalem, the mother church; Alexandria; Antioch; Rome; and New Rome, which became Constantinople. So for 1,000 years, these were the 5 sister churches that defined the faith, that explained the faith, that were always united in the understanding of the church. In 1054, there was a split in the church, a separation, from the West being the Church of Rome to the other 4, the Orthodox Church. So, being together for 1,000 years, that's a long time. And so being that the church was not united and communicating, some of these traditions sort of have evolved in their own corner, in a sense, of the world,
When this holy fire went out, and as you mentioned, it's on planes and going back to countries, but this is the first year it's come to America?
To my understanding, it's the first year that it was able to travel cross-Atlantic to come in, and it you can imagine in these days, and can you imagine trying to bring live fire in any kind of so special permissions were given and so forth. Right. And it came to the East Coast, and then state by state, it has, I think by now pretty much it has gone all the way through. So one gives it to the other, and it's a wave.
Yeah. In my fantasy world, someday, I hope that whether it's Orthodox or Catholic or Protestant, all the priests, all the ministers come out and say, the sign happened again. The fire happened again. It came out of nowhere, and we know where that nowhere is, kind of thing. I long for a time when a truly unified church acknowledges this beautiful sign that God has given all of us.
Yeah. And again, this is part of the tradition of the church. And in some churches, in some denominations, they don't really accept the concept of tradition. I don't know that the language will ever be stated. I don't know that this proclamation will ever be made. And that's the sad reality, in that because it is not part of our understanding or tradition, we just will not acknowledge it, But certainly within the Orthodox Church, it is, and before you leave, actually, I will give you a little bunch. I brought some from Jerusalem, those bunched candles. And I will give you a set to take along as a blessing that came from the Holy Sepulchre. But yeah, that is the light of Christ that illumines all. He is light.
Is this the greatest story never told?
Well, in many ways it is, but by extension, when we say this story, there's a lot of other stories that are sort of interwoven. The greatest story never told or never accepted by universe is really the resurrection of Christ. Even within Christian denominations, some of the more non-traditional, you ask them, do you really believe in the resurrection? And I'm dumbfounded that some would say, well, we're in the process of studying it and understanding it, I remember when I was in Harrisburg, I was the representative of our bishop to the Council of Churches there. And every so often they would come together for some meetings. And I remember one year, it was like a couple weeks after Easter, and I was just on fire with the feast and all that. And I was talking about it because they were asking me, so what is it like in your church and this and that? And when I kind of got some inklings of, I said, well, how do you understand it, And, when I heard the words, well, we're still studying it, we're still trying to understand it, did really happen. See, for me, that's like language that is so foreign. Because St. Paul says in Scripture that if we don't accept the resurrection, that our message is void. So for us Orthodox, the resurrection is the foundation. We don't need any good prophets and teachers. We need a Savior who rose from the dead. He was able to conquer death and give us life everlasting, life eternal. So, unfortunately, that does exist.
Yeah. It does exist. When I'm surprised, I shouldn't be, I'm surprised. I've told this, the story of the miracle of the Holy Fire to priests who have never heard it before. Yeah. And I don't know how clergy doesn't hear about this in some way, shape, or form. Have you found that to be true also?
It is true. There's a lot of miracles that happen, and sometimes they're isolated in given areas. And even in the States, even with the media that we have, I think the idea of the light coming this year has given such a spotlight to this miracle and to this event. But sometimes we're at fault too, because we just take it for granted. We don't talk about it as much because what's there to talk about? It is what it is. I have a lady who, she's our Holy Land ultimate pilgrim. She's been there I don't know how many times. And when she heard about it, she almost fainted from excitement. But that's not the joy that everybody else shares, because it's, okay, that's nice. It's there,
Well, without the resurrection, you're right. There is no St. Paul's Greek Orthodox Church or any other church.
There's no Christianity.
There's no Christianity. It's done, without the resurrection.
And the resurrection continues to give us and to sort of lighten the spark within us, never to forget that we are set apart because we belong to Christ, who is faith, hope, and love, and all the virtues that combined that make him who he is. So we are always people of hope. People of hope. If you want to extend out your hand, you can touch it.
Oh, beautiful.
So this is
Oh, this is what he does. This is how, these are the 33 all bunched.
These are the 33.
Are there 33 in there?
There
are
a lot of very narrow candles.
Oh, yeah.
And what they do in those cases, they put bigger candles or beeswax candles. So they seem like big bunches, but they're consisting of 33. Yeah.
So he comes out, and I've seen some video, and people, as you say, are running
they
it
go
through,
like this
through
and-
the beards
yeah,
and faces, and it doesn't burn. It's just,
does
it's
not
incredible.
burn.
And you can't argue that. You just can't argue
It's
that.
there.
It's
It's there.
it's group massive hypnosis, Father.
It's a unique setting, absolutely.
Okay, if we light these candles, then blow them out. Can we light these candles and blow them out?
Absolutely. Let me get on. So these are the flames that you see in the Holy Land. When you see these bunches and this bigger flame, is comprised by this kind of combining the candles together in these bunches.
That's a pretty good fire you got going there.
It is. It is. Here you go.
Oh, and just to tell you how creative Father Costas is, here's this gorgeous church, and they wanted to get a picture of the church, inside the church there, and the congregation. And the church seats some 400 or so people, so they had everyone come into the church, and then they had everyone turn around and look back and up for their picture.
Because we don't have a balcony here up high, we took a drone and we took a picture of the congregation. We wanted to
Are you
do a
serious?
congregation,
Inside the church?
We had to.
Oh, that
There
is
was
so
really no
cool.
other- Yeah. So everybody stood looking in the back, and the drone took a picture of us looking down.
You had a drone in here.
Believe it or
Oh,
not.
my Lord. Get a picture of the congregation. Smile.
Yeah.
Smile at the drone.
Exactly. And it was like one of those, keep smiling. We don't know which.
We don't know what it's doing.
What we're gonna
but
use, but just keep smiling, looking up
Oh,
and-
somebody blinked.
Isn't that great? There's creativity. Drones inside the church with Father Costas. Thank you, Father. And Father, in my conversation with him, helped me understand really why the rest of Christianity just never quite came back on board with the miracle of the Holy Fire. And it was part of our faith. It was part of all of Christianity. It was there. But then the separation happened. So before 1054, you've got these 5 Christian centers. You've got Rome, you have Constantinople, which became Istanbul, you've got Antioch, Alexandria, and Jerusalem, where the tomb is. And you have these 5 Christian centers, and okay, they're all going along pretty well. Little problems here and there, but they'd kiss and make up along the way. But when they got to 1054, they had enough with each other. And Rome went its way, and the other 4 went their way over arguments over papal authority, the Pope, and about the creed, certain phrase in the creed. So they split, and with that, Rome left behind Jerusalem, where the tomb is, and that beautiful miracle of the Holy Fire. Although they tried to go back and kind of like, maybe take it, and didn't quite work out. So that tradition ended. And yet, what do we have now? If you go to a vigil mass Saturday night, Easter weekend, what do you have? You have that one candle, and from it, all the other candles are lit, and pretty soon you have a church full of candlelight, as Father was talking about in his church. And so we brought part of that tradition with us, but we just haven't connected back to that tomb of Jesus Christ.
Thank you very much, Father.
You're very welcome.
There you go.
Again, be well.
You will too, Father.
Thanks
God
so
bless
much
you.
for
Thank
spending
you
the
so
time
much.
with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
Love it. Thank you again, Father Costas of St. Paul's Greek Orthodox Church in North Royalton, Ohio. And as I record this, the miracle will happen again. We know it because it always happens every year, for more than 1,600 years. It'll be happening Saturday, Holy Saturday, Orthodox Easter weekend, that makes it the 27th, right, of April. There you go. And afterwards, you can look it up and you'll find out, oh, it happened again. Looky there. And we have links in this week's email to article. Are you on our email list? If not, this week we have links to different articles written about the miracle, videos. You can see the fire and all that kind of stuff. If you're not signed up for this, every week we give you kind of the bigger perspective of these conversations God is having with us throughout the world. So if you're not on the email list, just go to this episode 55 here at touchedbyheaven.net. We have a link to get on our email list and stay informed about other things going on. It's pretty cool stories out there. And while you're on the website, touchedbyheaven.net, episode 55, you want to click through to Patreon if you want to help throw a little support our way. We appreciate that. We're now giving back in a number of different ways, so you can click through there and see what we're doing at Patreon. Pretty cool stuff. But anyway, it's here at episode 55 at touchedbyheaven.net, the miracle of the Holy Fire or miracle of the Holy Light. As a matter of fact, we were referencing there that a couple of years back, it was the first year it had come to the U.S., and so what I did when we began this podcast over a year ago, I think it was episode 2, we touched on a miracle that happened off the miracle. I was talking to my friend Dana Beagle and her friend Chris Pefkros and Chris's daughter Leah about how Dana got the fire to Chris and Leah, and then how the aunt got it and the mom. Anyway, there's a cool story leading up to a huge miracle that saved a house from burning down. Let's do that now.
Well, I had given some to Chris previously, and then hers went out. So she said, could I get some more of the holy fire? I'm like, oh, geez, absolutely. So I got a couple of unscented pillar candles, and the three of us met for dinner, and I had them wrapped in towels in a metal wastebasket, and I left them in my car while we were at dinner because I couldn't obviously take them into the restaurant.
Wait a minute. So you've got fire in your car.
Absolutely. We were seated in the restaurant so I could see my car, and we were right across from a fire station. So
it exploded. You could see it. We had front seats to the explosion.
Yeah. Fire department puts out miracle of holy fire in car. Yeah, that's a good headline.
So, we went out, and I got in my car, and I went, gosh, there's an odor in my car, but they were unscented candles, so I didn't think much of it.
Was it a bad odor?
Oh, no, it was beautiful. It was like a lovely scent. Yes.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't an odor. It was an aroma. You had an aroma going on.
Thank you. That's the word, Philip. Thank you.
So anyway, then I gave it to Chris and Leah, and I think Leah maybe held it in her lap on the way home. And they called me about halfway home, and they said, did you put some oils in these candles? And I went, no. And they said, because they have an aroma. And I said, well, I've often noticed in my house that every once in a while, there is a beautiful aroma of myrrh. And then I'll let Chris and Leah take it from here because
the scent was so strong. It was so sweet and beautiful. It actually reminded me of being in church at the Orthodox Church, but it was just so sweet and beautiful, and it was so powerful. That's why we called Dana, and I was just shocked when she said she hadn't put any oils or anything in there, and we just had the blessed ride home, Halia.
It was. It felt like I was in church. It was like so different.
You know, and I wasn't sure what myrrh smelled like. I mean, you hear the gold, frankincense, and myrrh thing, and you learn that the myrrh was for burial. I assume to keep as the body decayed, it was to keep things a little more pleasant in there. But and then when we were at the Orthodox Church, Father said, "Would you like to smell myrrh?" And like you, it's like, oh, that's church, man. That just smells like church.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Talk about that moment when you call Dana and she says, "No, there's nothing there. It's whatever you have, came from someplace else."
Well, it was nice because we've got like almost a 50-minute ride home. So we're in a small space. So it was very relaxing. And I just felt like I was within, the presence of God and the Holy Spirit. And I felt protected and loved. And I felt like it was just a gift, very much a gift. I mean, it's one thing to get the holy fire and to get it home. And it's another thing to be able to have that amazing fragrance, that aroma. I put the fire in my living room. And that's where I keep my candles, and I have, some icons there. It's kind of like my sanctuary. I keep the doors closed. But what was most remarkable is the next morning I woke up to the aroma. So not only, because the room is closed off, it was not only the room that was very powerful, it was like throughout the house.
I would come home from school and I was like, Mom, I still smell it. And I didn't know if she was burning something else, but it was the holy fire.
You could smell it, I'd say, when you'd walk in from the front door. I think it was at least a week. And even my husband, who doesn't notice those kinds of things, he works and comes home late. And he usually doesn't, notice, like I said, that kind of stuff. He said, "What's that smell?" That's not the best word, but he was like, "What are you burning now?" or "What are you doing?"
But for the scent to be added to it, for God to go, I always say to go to the trouble.
Yeah.
It's no trouble, but for God to go to the trouble, if you will, so that you could experience that, that's just pretty special, isn't it?
No, miracles happen all the time. And sometimes I felt like this one touched all the senses because the sense of smell is very powerful. So aroma's very special to us. I felt like God just amplified that gift.
you should tell them the story about your aunt's holy fire.
Oh, now here we go. Now we're talking here because the bigger miracle of the holy fire. Well, daughter Leah was there. Chris's mom was there. They're at Chris's aunt's house for this miracle of the holy fire.
Oh, this is remarkable. My aunt also received the holy fire from the church. And actually, Leah was there. Leah had spent the night at my aunt's home. And Leah has a long ride to school. So they were in a hurry. And they had leftover lentil soup for breakfast.
Wow.
For Greeks.
Boy, you were running late. You were running late if you're having soup for breakfast.
So that was breakfast, and she was kind of in a hurry, and she had some soup and Leah. And my aunt said there was just a little bit of soup left, like maybe 4 or 5 tablespoons left in the pan. And she took Leah to school, and then she didn't go home. She decided to go pick up my mom, and they went out shopping, and they did all these things. And long story short, my aunt gets home probably at midnight. It was 11 or 12 o'clock. It was really late. She had been gone all day. And she had my mom with her. She was going to spend the night. That's how late it was. So when they get in the house, my mom said to her sister, who's my aunt, she said, Katina, she said, your gas stove is on. And she's like, what? And she looks, and it was on very low on the pot with the lentil soup. The whole house should have burned down. The soup, the pot was not burned, and the soup was not burned. It was still like just as she had left it.
Gee.
But tell her where the fire
And
is.
the holy fire is right there. My aunt keeps her holy fire on her stove in the center. She actually keeps her holy fire candle in a lantern because also, we're gone from the house and we keep these candles on. So we're trying to be really cautious with that. But at the same time, we're kind of celebrating the miracle of that light in our home. So she's kept it on just as I have for months. And when, she has it on all the time. But anyways, it was on the stove and it was right there. And my aunt and my mom had the chills, and they felt very blessed and very protected because that house should have burned down. There's no explanation. The pot was there from Leah gets dropped. They probably left at 6:30 in the morning and come home at midnight.
So about 18 hours later.
Yeah. And nothing was burned. It did not smell like anything. My mom just happened to notice that the gas, the pilot, and it was hot. The actual pot was hot. That it was on the stove, but it was not burned.
Jeez.
And there was still soup in there, like a few, just how she left it. I mean, the whole pot, I've left a pot of boiling water. And, if I forget or something, I've burned a couple little pots with that. I mean, there's just no explanation besides she was touched by that miracle because, it was a tremendous blessing.
Oh, it says so much about your faith. It says so much about your family's faith. Moms, everybody. Wow.
Yeah, she's had some issues with her eyes. Where she had some pain and she had some doctor's appointments. And I know she said she would put her hands above the holy fire and say her prayers. And then she would take her hands and touch her eyes. I know that she has, felt better and just, managing her own health with her own miracles in her connection with God in her own home. So it's a tremendous blessing. And we're grateful actually that Dana shared that with us because here we are, Orthodox. And I had no idea that the Holy Fire was here. My mom has it going, my aunt, and we feel very blessed.
Absolutely beautiful.
So we're happy to share this story.
Thank you, Chris, Leah, and Dana, once again, here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. If there is no resurrection, there's no Christianity. And what a beautiful sign. What a gorgeous sign God gives us every year for more than 1,600 years. This miracle of the holy fire, miracle of the holy light. It's tremendous. So share it. Let other people know as well. And they too will look at you dumbfounded going, what? If that happened, I would know this because I would know this. Wouldn't I? No, not so much. Not so much. Thank you for listening to touchedbyheaven.net. Hey, I need your stories, your encounters. What's happened with you? Angels, prophetic dreams, God incidents? What the heck is it you've been kind of sitting on there and can share here very safely because we're all believers here. So share your story with me here at touchedbyheaven.net. Contact me, touchedbyheaven.net. Or you want to email me directly, I am trapper@blindguymedia.com. Trapper@blindguymedia.com. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for your support through Patreon. Thank you for sharing these stories everywhere you can. Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.